Great to be here. Always fun to come back to Oasis, and excited about what God's doing here. This is an interesting little account, and I never know what the preacher is hoping that I'll present when I get a text like this, because I've never preached on Acts chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. But it is interesting to look at the different people groups that were evidenced in that, and then I got the friends. Now, that was really interesting. I got the friends. I got to open this up here. So, I don't know what you have discovered in your life, what finally gets somebody's attention. Now, in this account, the guy got healed, right? And he couldn't walk forever. All of a sudden, he's running and dancing. I actually saw a pastor do this once, and he started running and skipping and dancing across the deck. And I thought, buddy, calm down. And I'm not going to do that. But I thought that was interesting. I mean, he was trying to demonstrate that this guy was really having a great time because for the first time in his life, he could walk. And so I thought, well, I wonder how that was received. And of course, it says in the scriptures that the friends were filled with wonder and amazement. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Let's see if there we go. So I thought it's interesting. What does it take to get somebody's attention? You know, so that they say, what on earth has happened to you? In this case, it was a miracle. And so he was walking upright and he's running around. You know, it's interesting in September 11th, 2001, when 9/11 took place, people said, you know what? That's going to revitalize the church. That's going to change everything. And people are going to come back. And for 3 weeks, they did. Then 3 weeks later, kind of everything was kind of back to normal. And that really didn't do it. Some people said, well, this pandemic, now when it's over, people are going to be so happy to come back. They're going to be out and about. They're going to fill the churches. Just thankful for God that it's over. And you know what? That's probably not going to happen. Matter of fact, I think the opposite might be true. I was talking to a woman who's Roman Catholic, and we were just talking about church, and I know that for Roman Catholics, you know, attendance is kind of a big deal. You got to show up, or I was talking to a priest once, and he said, so how do you get people to come? I said, well, you know, we make the invitation, and we try to respond well when they show up. I said, how about you? He said, oh, we just tell them they're going to hell if they don't show up. I think he was joking, but I don't know. And so, I mean, it was interesting, but, you know, some people are thinking that people are not going to return. But this woman said, you know, it's all online, and it's so convenient. Just to, you know, get up, have a cup of coffee, sit in your sweatpants, and watch church. And I said, yeah, and Jesus said so much about convenience. Which, of course, he did not. But what does it take to get somebody's attention? You know, that's interesting. Somewhere along the line, maybe someone has to say, what happened to you? Why do you care about me? Why are you helping me? Or who are you and what have you done to my husband? My wife didn't say that, but that's kind of what she was thinking, I'm quite certain. Used to be a thing called Promise Keepers. I don't know if you heard about Promise Keepers. It's a big deal for a while. There's an example, by the way, of a deal that lost its vision. Their vision was to host a big event for men to show up in a sports arena. But then they decided that we could do more. And they decided then that they would try to develop a point person in every congregation. Every congregation had to have one guy who was established to be and so they were going to lead men's groups in the local church. And then they decided, we really don't need to charge anything. We're just going to make it a free will offering. And guess what? Thing went away. When I heard that it's coming back because they've returned to their original vision, it was really interesting, that original vision. What brought Oasis together? What is the point of this place? What's your vision for ministry? What is it that you believe God has called you to do? Because there's lots of worship services in this area, right? There's lots of other church buildings where people go, but I think that God has called you out for a reason, for a purpose. What is it? When I was serving Lutheran Church of the Cross, we were so laser focused on our mission statement that we used it every Sunday. I'd preach on it 5 times a year. We were just intent that we were not going to lose that vision of what God had called us to do right there. Because vision leaks, you know what I'm saying? If you don't remind people, if you don't keep it up in front of people, if you don't speak to it regularly, people will lose sight of it, and then things change, and pretty soon you will exist for the sake of existing. How many churches in the United States exist now simply for the purpose of existing? They kind of lost their focus. They lost their mission. They lost their vision. I led LCMC, this association you're a part of. I led that for 10 years, and everywhere I went, I said, here's the deal. The congregation's a front line of ministry. If we lose that idea, we're going to become just like every other major mainline Protestant denomination, and soon we will die. And, I'm grateful to God that our board is committed to that vision. The new service coordinator committed to that vision. And I'm excited about the potential, but I pray for it because it's so easy to lose that sense of vision. Promise Keepers lost that vision. But when it was high and mighty, when it was rolling, when it was working, it was powerful. And it changed me. It changed me. I went to this deal and I thought, okay, another men's program, big deal, going to have some athletes speak and some super praise band that we can never emulate. But I'll go because the guys want to go. So we get on a bus, we get up there. The first night, the speaker said, he just stopped in the middle of what he was doing. He said, okay, you know what? I just got to say something here. Are there any pastors in the room? And he said, I'd like you to stand. So, I'm not big for calling attention to myself, but I thought, well, everybody looking at me, so I better stand up. And so I stood up and he said, okay, now men, look around. These are people that God has called out to serve you. Pastors, I want you to sit down. Everybody else, I want you to stand up. And then he said, I want you to pray for these pastors. And that's the first time in my life that anybody had prayed for me as a pastor. And I thought, this is powerful, and I started weeping. I just started sobbing. And then the next guy got up, and he started talking about what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a father. And I am convicted to my soul. And I was moved. The whole thing just changed me. When we got home, my wife came and picked me up in the parking lot. I'm hugging these men. We're crying. And she's looking at me like, who are you, and what have you done with my husband? And so that night, we packed everything up. She went home, and I went to Hy-Vee at 11 o'clock at night, and I bought her flowers. And I said, I'm going to do that every week. I'm going to buy her flowers. Interestingly enough, I discovered 2 weeks ago, she does not like yellow roses. I've been bringing her yellow roses for like 47 years. It's like, well, why didn't you say something? She said, well, I don't want to make you feel bad. Honey, we've been married 47 years. You can make me feel bad. And so now it's red roses. But, it got to be a little expensive every week. And I get my allowance, and I run out of my money, and I can't put it on a charge card because she'll figure that out. And so we had a big funeral at the church. There are a lot of a lot of flowers left over at a funeral, you know what I'm saying? So I thought, nobody's going to miss a few flowers out of this big bouquet. So I pull a few flowers out, a couple of those big long, are they irises or whatever they are, put them in a nice little bouquet, brought them home, and Kenneth was so moved. I just didn't, Rose, this is a whole bouquet. And then she came to church. That bouquet looks a little thin. She said, you brought me funeral flowers, didn't you? I said, yeah, honey, I did. And, it's a thought that counts, right? And she goes, no. Stop bringing me flowers and don't ever bring me funeral flowers again. But I thought, you know what? I got to play this out. I've got to start doing the dishes once in a while. I got to start helping with the laundry, cleaning toilets. And so I realized that God had called me to more than just being a pastor, having a job. And it changed me. She noticed. And she started saying something about it. When we're thinking about all of that, this guy who had never walked, now he's walking, and people noticed. But how does that happen for us? Wonder, amazement, curiosity, maybe even a little fear goes along with all of that. And it's interesting when we think about it, where we work in Southeast Asia, one of our pastors was actually arrested and thrown in jail. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There was evidence that he was a Christian. There was evidence that the nation noticed. I flew to Vietnam once with our missionary, and he'd been flagged in their national computer. He was not allowed into the country. They took him into immigration. They figured out who he was. They walked him right back on the plane where we'd been for 30 hours and sent him back home. And there was evidence to convict him. And I thought, well, what about me? I'm a Christian. But apparently there was nothing in me that they saw. Well, when we're thinking about that here in the States, how does that work here? How does that work here? Well, maybe if you're thinking about these things, maybe we just need to start looking for opportunities. So I was telling Dan that I'm a realtor and I've listed a house now with a couple, and they have a Buddha sitting outside. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting, and their names are not Dutch at all. And so I said, so is that a Buddha outside? And they go, yeah. And I said, well, it doesn't look like the Buddhists that we see in like Asia. And he said, well, we're from Nepal. And every country kind of pictures Buddha a little differently. They said, but we're not really Buddhists. We're Hindu. And I said, oh, that's amazing. So we're looking at this house. I'm going to list it. And up in his office, he's got a little altar area where he burns incense. Make sure we get that word right. Incense, and he has a place where he prays to the Hindu god. And so I'm thinking, how can I connect with these people? And so last night, I was again working on my sermon today, and I just paused and I thought, Lord, would you give me an opportunity to serve these people and open a door for conversation? Have you ever asked that prayer? Have you ever asked the Lord to give you an opening so that you can share your faith with somebody? If you do that, be ready. So I prayed that prayer, and then I went back to working on my sermon. My phone rings. It's 10 o'clock at night. My phone rings, and so I answer it. And it's the wife of this Hindu couple. And she goes, Mark, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we've locked ourselves out of our house. And I know there's a key in your lockbox. Could you come and let us in? And, they live in my town. I said, absolutely, I'll be there in a minute. And so I threw on my shoes, and I ran out the door, got my car, and drove over there. And I said, you know what? I'm so grateful you called. So grateful you called. Because I'm here to serve you folks, and this is what we do. And so they were grateful. But so nothing happened about faith, but it's an opening. It's a start. It's a way to begin to plant seeds. So this is the way we got to operate, I think, in our world. So I'm at when I was working for LCMC, I worked from home, and I'm sitting at my dining room table because when my wife leaves the house, I take over the whole house. Don't tell her. So I'm sitting there. It's a hot summer day. It's humid, and my neighbor across the street mowing her yard. And I thought, man, that poor woman, that's got to be terrible. It's like 95 and humid. Somebody ought to go help her. So I said, Lord, you got to raise up some young men in our neighborhood, help that poor woman mow her yard. Her husband died, a few months ago. I'm feeling bad for her. So I prayed a second time, Lord, you got to raise up somebody. Then finally it dawned on me, maybe that was me. So I put on pants. You're working from home. Zoom calls, you keep that camera up. And so I went over, I said, hey, Deb, this looks like, this is a lot of work. Why don't you sit down, let me finish your mowing your yard. Oh, you don't need to do that. And I said, no, I know I don't need to, but I want to. Let me do that for you. She goes, well, okay, I'm going to go get a drink of water. I said, that'd be great. So she goes in the house, and I finish the yard. She comes out, and she goes, that was so nice of you. Why would you do that? And I said, well, Jesus thought it'd be a good idea if I did that for you today. And she said, what? And I said, God has done so much for me. I just want to help. And it began a conversation. And now we kind of have the reputation in our neighborhood that if you need prayer, you can call up Mark and Candace, and they'll come pray for you. We had a neighbor fall out of our tree. What a good idea this is. You can trim your tree with a stepladder against a tree with a chainsaw. And you're in your 70s. And so John falls off the ladder, and he breaks a couple ribs, and he's laying there in the yard. And Jan calls, her next door neighbor. She goes, "Mark, come over here." And I'm, washing my car or something. And so he said, "Mark, I'm really scared. Would you pray for me?" He said, "Absolutely, John. Lord Jesus, forgive this man for being an idiot." And no, that's not my prayer. If we look for opportunities, if you ask, and if there's somebody in particular you're kind of interested in. Did I tell you about the woman who said, "I've nagged my husband for 3 years to come to church and he won't come"? Have I told you about her? Oh, this is amazing. So she calls me up. She said, "I've had it." And I said, "So what's going on?" She goes, "Well, he won't come to church with me." And I said, "Well, what have you been trying? I mean, well, I've been nagging him for 3 years." I said, "Well, that's not working, so let's stop doing that, okay?" So I said, "You and I, let's covenant to pray for him every day for as long as it takes." So we prayed that morning together. And then she called me up 3 days later. Well, nothing's happened. 3 days, I mean, come on. Let's give God just a little bit more time than that. And so we continued to pray. And what I heard later was that about 6 weeks after we started praying, a new guy came to work. And this new guy sat down at lunch and he opened his Bible. And the husband saw that and he thought, well, that's odd. And a couple more weeks go by, and finally he sits down with the new guy and he said, "Boy, my wife would love you." And the guy said, I don't even know your wife. And he said, "Why would you say that?" And he said, "Because you're one of them Bible thumpers." And he said, "No, this is the only time I have to read my Bible, so I'm doing it over lunch. I hope it doesn't bother you." And he said, "No, it doesn't bother me. I just don't get it." And he walked away. Another week goes by, and the husband sits down with him. He said, "So I'm curious, why are you doing that? I mean, what is your deal?" So they started a conversation. A few more weeks go by, but now the husband is sitting down with this guy just about every day, and they have lunch and they talk, and finally the guy starts sharing his faith with him. I mean, it took weeks and weeks, but finally something changed. So I see the wife walking up the steps of the church, and she's got her arm on she's got a guy with her, and she's holding his hand. They're walking up the steps. I thought, well, she's finally started dating. And she comes up and she goes, "Mark, I want to introduce you to my husband." I said, "Well, I am so glad that you're here. I've been praying for you for, 3 months. And he said, "Yeah, I know. But, hopefully the walls won't cave in when I cross the threshold." And I said, "Tell you what, cowboy, you come in here and you look around, you're going to see a ton of guys just like you. And to be honest with you, I was one of them. I came kicking and screaming, but God brought me here. And now he's brought you." That guy became a church leader. He was on the board. He taught Sunday school. He was a confirmation leader. The boys in the class loved this guy because here's a man with gnarled hands, just an ordinary guy, and they loved him. This is amazing how God works, and maybe you're going to be that person. You're opening your Bible at lunch, and people are going to stop by and wonder about that and ask you about it. But the question is, somewhere along the line, somebody's got to ask, what happened to you? What happened to you? What changed you? What changed in your life? And so when you guys cleaned up the streets for the derecho, right? And some folks from Church of the Cross came over. That's exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly what's happening in Cambodia. We're digging wells, and people say, "Why would you do that?" And it's a way that we earn the right to eventually, not right away, we earn the right eventually to tell them about Jesus. One of the things we stopped doing is inviting people to church. Why would you invite somebody to church that doesn't know Jesus? Because what do we do here? We worship Jesus, right? And so would you go to some place? Would you go with a person from another religion to their worship service when you don't worship that God? I wouldn't either. And why do we quote the Bible to people? It's like quoting the phone book. It's irrelevant. They don't get it, and they don't like it, and they haven't read it. But they're looking at you. They're looking at you. and they want to know what you think. We live in a very spiritually charged environment. I don't know if you're aware of that. Very spiritually charged. 50 years ago, do you think a Hindu couple would have a Buddhist outside their house in nice little Altoona, Iowa? Not a chance. Now it's wide open. Whatever you worship, whatever makes you feel good, that's all good. And you'd be surprised there are people really interested in what you believe and what you think about God. Now, I look for opportunities to tell people about Jesus, about him, and try to do it in ways that are normal and natural. And so it's not complicated. It's just next door. It's our neighbors. So Candace and I were talking yesterday. We got a new neighbor to our house. And this is a drift car racer. And so he's got drift cars. And do you know what a drift car racer does? I mean, this is like a Ford Mustang with a big motor and slick tires, and they try to get that back end to slide around the racetrack. And it's nothing but tire smoke. That's the whole goal, is burn off your tires, which I'm kind of a fan of, to be honest with you. So we thought we should invite these two over, because I stop and talk to them all the time. They're not married. They bought a house, so I've offered to do their wedding, and she's excited. He put it off, which is fine. but we're going to invite them over for dinner some night, just barbecue, just to get to know them a little bit and create an opportunity down the road to have a conversation. Last time they went out, I mean, that seems like kind of a dangerous sport, right? And I said, so what's the goal? He said, the goal is to go side by side and just barely touch cars, touch fenders. I said, you got to be kidding me. And he said, no, it's pretty exciting. And I said, tell you what, I'm going to be praying for you every time I see your truck leave with that car on the trailer. And he said, that would be great. And she goes, yeah, please, would you? and so it's just a way to start. Eventually, somebody's got to ask. But you know what? It's really also all about timing. Is it 10:15 already? That's crazy. That's not right. Can you make it go? There you go. It's really about timing. You remember the parable of the sower and the seed? Right? The parable. Do you remember that one? So there's this sower, and the sower grabs the seed and throws it. And some of the seed fell on the path or the road, and of course the birds came and ate it. Some of the seed fell on rocky soil, and it grew up fast, but because it had no root, when the sun came up, went away. Some of the seed fell among the weeds, and the weeds choked it out. Some of the seed fell on good old Iowa soil, and it grew and produced 30, 50, and 100-fold. This is kind of a description of the age in which we're living, right? The road, the path. Do you think we're pretty busy in the U.S.? Do you think that we got a million things we can do? I work with some people in real estate, and they call me and say, Mark, could you show a house today because my son has a baseball game? And I said, really? It's 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. Yeah, he's in a tournament, and I really want to see him play. I mean, they are going constantly. They're traveling for baseball so their boys can play baseball. And that's like the only thing they can do because they got so much other stuff going on. Everything has to fold into baseball. Do you think they have time to go to church on Sunday? Not a chance. And we work a lot of hours. We have things that we have to accomplish. We got to go here, there, and everywhere. And you know what? Sometimes I think we just don't have time. And I'm a person that likes to keep busy. But once in a while, I don't drive over the speed limit. And I look around. And if I see somebody on the side of the road, I'll pull over. Just because if there's a way I can help, I want to help. And then I give my business card. The one from Lutheran Asian Ministries, not real estate, because that would be tacky. Some of the seed fell on a rock, and it grew up quickly. Have you ever known somebody that really got excited about Jesus, got all excited about their faith, just on fire, and then 2 months later, you can't find them anymore? That happens. There was a guy in the church I served. He had gone to 6 Billy Graham crusades. He had committed his life for the first time 6 times. It's like there was no depth, there was no root. And you know what? Paul talks about the goal is to really raise mature Christians, mature believers, so that we grow up. It's in Ephesians chapter 4, so that we grow up into a mature faith. And how are we doing at making mature Christians in the U.S.? I was at a workshop yesterday, and the presenter said, you know what I think right now in the U.S., those believers in Jesus are actually the remnant. That everything has changed, and the culture now doesn't see us as valuable, as important, or of any significance. Wow. Some of the rocks grew in the weeds, and they just got choked out. They never had a chance. It never really able to take root. I was talking to our leader in Cambodia. He said, really what we need to do is we need to raise leaders who can come alongside these new Christians and help them to grow in their faith, to take the next step. It's not just about planting your backside in a chair on Sunday morning. It's about living this life, this faith, 24/7. And we just don't have enough people. But when that seed falls on the soil, great things can happen. But it's about timing. Maybe your life right now is hectic and busy and you just can't do all the things you'd like to do. Maybe you're taking care of parents and you're taking care of children. That happens a lot when you get to be that sandwich generation. Sometimes I think that we just need to step back and let God work and be in control of the process. So we had one of our young people end up graduating from high school, going to the University of Northern Iowa, and got wrapped up into a Christian ministry there. And so Ben calls me up and he says, Mark, I'm so excited. I found Jesus, and how come you never told us about him? What? Give me a break, Ben. That's all we talked about. And he said, no, it wasn't. I never heard it before. Well, you know, I get that because he wasn't ready. The Spirit of God had not brought that softness to his heart, his openness to his mind, that he could finally hear the message. I was talking to a member of the church who was a church council, on call committees, taught Bible studies, everything. And he came to me a couple, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and he said, oh, Mark, I'm so excited. I finally got it. What? And he said, it's finally become real. I know Jesus as my Lord and Savior. So I gave him a hug, but I thought, well, what a waste of breath I carried out for 20 years. But he wasn't ready. It was about timing. So part of what we need to do is also be discerning. Because you can't meet somebody and then tell them, by the way, are you saved? Are you going to hell? That's not going to help. They're going to look at you and walk away and think, what a nut. But if we can develop a relationship, let them know that we care about them, that they're important to us. That opens the door for just about anything else to happen. So the truth is, it's the Holy Spirit that creates faith, not us. We simply want to be ready, let the Lord work, and trust that God is in control. We just want to be ready. Watch the Lord work. And remember that he is in control. I have a picture here. This is the last thing I'll share with you. This was a feast that was set before Tom Lovan and I in a province of northeastern Vietnam, pretty near China, a province called Sun La. We'd never been there before, and we'd come to talk with them about Jesus. We didn't say that first, but the village came out and they said, well, before we do any of that, we'd like to have you sit down and join us for a banquet. We said, that would be great. And so they all gathered back there. We sat up here, and they brought this food in front of us. And this is pork. This is a big old pig. And they had some other meat there. You just don't ask. Just don't ask. And we sat down, and so I looked at Tom, and he said, what should we do? And he said, they want us to eat. I said, that'd be great. So we started eating, and then a guy sat down right across from us, watching us eat. But he was speaking, and he was saying something that was clearly memorized. It was some sort of rite or ritual. We didn't know what it was, and I don't speak the language. So I said, Tom, what's the guy doing? He said, I'll tell you later. So we eat, and then everybody pauses, and they look at us. And I said, so what is this all about? And he said, well, just wait a minute. So finally, the guy stood up, he turned to everybody, he said, basically, let's eat. And so we all ate. We had a great meal together, great banquet. And then it was over, and I said to Tom, so what was that all about? And he said, well, the food they set before us had not yet been offered to their idols. And so they wanted to see if their gods would kill us. Excuse me? Well, this is kind of how they test whether or not you're genuine, that your God is greater than their God. And I said, I'm really glad you told me now and not then, because I would have run the other way. I mean, really, do you think about the shaman or the high priest of the village? What if he'd poisoned the food in order to, establish his reputation? Well, thank God the guy didn't do that. But what it led to was this meeting. So later that night, and a few of the townspeople gathered together in a room, and Tom, we sat down, and Tom started telling them, he said, I want to introduce you to somebody that you've never met, you do not know. And they looked at me, and he said, no, not the white guy. I want to tell you about Jesus, who is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And they listened intently to what he was saying. It was really powerful, just to be a part of it, just to be there. It led to 5 baptisms in a hotel room. And Tom, I mean, we couldn't do this out in the public. We couldn't do it out at a river. We had to shut the door of our hotel room because now they had traveled to Hanoi. And we had Secret Service in the hotel lobby watching our coming and going with us for the most part. These 5 people were baptized. And today, they are leading a church in the capital city of that province. And the gospel is expanding like it's just hard to imagine. But the point was, we didn't die. Which my wife is always very happy about, that I actually come home. You never know what it's going to be. You never know what impact you're going to have. You never know what little thing that you're going to do is going to begin a conversation, lead to a relationship where you can tell them eventually about Jesus. It's not about inviting them to church or handing them a Bible. Not yet. Eventually, if I'm a believer, I want to worship with other believers. But to begin with, it's just letting them know that we care. The Holy Spirit is at work right here, right now, in this area, in your neighborhood, in the people around you, using us to tell the good news of God in Jesus Christ, eventually, when the time is right. That's what happened to this guy. He got healed, running through the community. People wondered. Now, not everybody became a believer. Not everyone did, but many did. And the church grew.